Today I'm going to go over with you the most important things you need to know about painting in watercolor. When you were a kid like me, you probably used some cheap pans of watercolor. In order to avoid a watery, weak, diluted painting, I totally recommend using tube paints. It's very easy to get bold, strong washes with this kind of paint. What I recommend is starting off with your primary colors and build your palette from there. A lot of people get pretty hung up about the color on their palette. What I recommend is a strategy to keep it as simple as you can. My philosophy is that value is more important than color. If you aren't sure what value is, don't worry, we're going to talk more about that in just a little bit. When it comes to paper, if you want to just practice mixing a few colors, it's totally okay to buy the cheap watercolor paper. But once you start painting actual paintings, you'll want to use 100% cotton paper. When you start using paper with wood pulp or other things mixed into it, you'll notice that they start to come off or even dissolve when you start using your washes. And they can be pretty flimsy, and it's really not enjoyable to work on. Now you have hot press, cold press, and rough textured paper. Hot press is a really smooth surface. A lot of artists that paint portraits or subjects that require a lot of precision, they like hot pressed paper because of its smooth surface. Rough textured papers has a lot more texture on it, and this can become handy when you like to use dry brush or other broken mark effects. Actually, the texture of your paper can add a lot of character to your paintings. Now, I land right in the middle with cold press paper. It still has a good amount of texture on it, so it can still be nice to show those broken edges if I want, and the texture can still play a role. Once you have your paint and your paper, you're going to need some brushes to apply that paint. Just like all of these elements, there's many options that come with brushes. There's natural hair brushes and synthetic brushes. Natural hair brushes are made from animal hair, and synthetic brushes are just that. Now, natural hair brushes, they can often be quite expensive. Now, if you're not sure what brushes you'll need to start off with, I would try a couple of large brushes. Some are called mop brushes, or a larger size medium round brush, size 14. And then have a few smaller medium round, size 12, 8, or 4. Something that has a synthetic brush with a point. Almost everything you paint can be done with these simple brushes. Let's talk about watercolor palettes. Oftentimes you will hear artists insist on painting on a metal palette, but honestly, you could totally use cheap plastic palettes. They work great. What you should consider is thinking about the area for mixing your colors. You can find a palette that can hold multiple different colors, but they often have just a small square for mixing. So when considering your palette, definitely think of how large you're able to mix your colors. There are 3 ways to apply the paint on paper. The first is wet on dry. You're mixing up your paint and you're applying paint onto dry paper. The second is wet on wet. This is where your paper is wet and you're applying paint onto wet paper, or paint onto another wash that's still wet. This is nice because it creates soft, lovely edges and the paint is mixing together on the paper. Now let's talk about dry on dry. That is where you're using less water in your brush and you're painting onto dry paper. Often the paint is straight from the tube. A dry brush mark is really attractive when it's put on top of a wet on wet wash, where you have soft, lost edges and then you have sharp, nice mark over that. That contrast and edge is really attractive part of painting, and we want to take advantage of it. Let's talk about the surface that you're going to work on. My main workspace is a folding table. It is easy to move around my studio. Now on my table, I use a large square piece of plexiglass. This allows me to prop up the plexiglass and my art piece and work on an angle. The angle of your board will affect the wash that you're working with. If you have it more tilted, it's going to float down. If you have it more flat, the water is going to sit still on your paper and create puddles. I typically paint at about a 20 to 30 degree angle. There are many approaches to painting watercolor. The one you're more likely to see is painting light to dark. Often the lightest areas of our scene are made up of the white paper itself. And the way to capture this and preserve this is to gradually paint darker and darker throughout the painting. Each wash, you're thinking about the light you are leaving behind. Remember early on when I mentioned that my philosophy is that value is more important than color? Let's talk about that really quick. Values are simply how light or dark something is. You can take a fantastic painting or a fantastic photograph and you can take the color away and it still reads powerfully. Values are the main tools that we have to create light of the scene. Without proper values, our painting simply won't work. I like to think of values in three different groups: your lights, midtones, and your darks. And the best way to start to see these is to squint at the scene you are painting. In doing this, you are blurring out the insignificant details and minimizing the color of the scene. This will help you see the large shapes more clearly. I know that's a lot to think about right now, but I really wanted to mention that right now, because if you focus on value first before color, you're totally going to see an improvement with your paintings. My process of watercolor painting is to paint with 3 steps. So my first wash, I lay down in the lightest values of my scene all around the painting in one wet on wet wash. After that, I let my paintings dry and I come back in and I think about large middle value shapes. Painting in large shapes makes your painting easier to read from a distance, more attractive and connected and stronger. And we get to take advantage of one of the most beautiful parts of the medium, and that is the transition from color to color on your paper, allowing colors to mix. The third step in my process is to paint the details of the scene. These are often the most dark areas. One of the most challenging parts about painting is wanting to rush. We all want to rush to the details. We think the details are the most important, but actually that's not the case. The value and the large shapes are more important. No medium is easy to paint in. Everything you take on is going to take hard work, practice, and dedication. I'm hopeful that the information I'm giving you can fast track your learning, and hopefully you don't have to paint as many paintings as I did to see major progress in your painting. And with all that, if you made it this far, help me reach my goal of 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2026. And I'll see you every week. Enjoy painting.